Welcome to the behind the scenes video for the song, You Won't Remember My Name, which this was just written, I think, 2 weeks ago. This came together very quickly. And it's funny because the other song that we did together just now, I Dare You Not to Fall in Love With Me, was in theory inspired somewhat by Johnny Cash, that song Jackson, that was a duet. So is this one, because it's a modern day retelling of the song Man in Black. What if we were to focus on the people that tend to be ignored in society? But I wanted to do this on a much more relevant and challenging perspective, because I think in modern day it's easier to get caught up in political sides, and therefore we don't see those other people on the other side that apparently we think in our minds, in the back of our minds, those people don't matter. Ultimately, how can we define it? Is it as if we perceive these people do not have souls? Because if we can perceive that a person does not have a soul, it's easy for us to not care about them. So the whole first verse is about my interpretation of the United States involvement in war. 100% I support the troops. Do I question why the government sends our troops overseas? Yes. And so here's the words. Let's start a war overseas, which I think is very telling. We're led to believe that we're fighting for our country. We're fighting for our freedom. But it's interesting that these wars keep happening overseas. It's interesting to me that even in the 9/11 attack, looking back, all the people on the plane were from Saudi Arabia, one of our buddies, one of our ultimate allies. They were the ones on the plane. And ultimately, so if they're on our side, why were they on the plane? Ultimately, it goes to this next line. Let's start a war overseas with perceived enemies. We're the world's police fighting to be free from the rebels whom we gave the keys. And this is not the only time where I've seen this. I mean, I know that we've done this with Afghanistan. We were arming them to fight the Soviets. We have this history of, if someone is a distant threat to us, let's arm them somehow and hope they don't rebel against us, and they often do. And so ironically, we're fighting for our freedom from the rebels that we helped arm a while back, or we somehow instigated that. Even ISIS, if you look at what started it ultimately was our involvement, and that was sort of a backlash from that. And the next part, ignore civilian casualties. They don't believe in Christianity. While Jesus weeps, the army jeeps proceed to spread our disease. And I think it's very interesting, and this is where we're leaning into the course about people that we don't perceive as having souls. What about those civilians overseas that are the casualties of our involvement in those wars? We could even talk about Vietnam. I think about this. What if I were 20 years old in the 1960s in Vietnam, and I was born there, and either I fight the Americans and the South Vietnamese, or I'm going to be executed? What am I going to do? It's ultimately my own nation, but here's this other nation getting involved. So now I'm forced to fight. And actually, this was largely inspired by Anthony Bourdain, Parts Unknown. He did an episode on Vietnam where he visited people in North Vietnam to sort of get their perspective. It's not that they wanted to fight the United States. They were forced to, if you were a man. And I think that could have been me. I could have been born as one of those people. There's on, is it Band of Brothers that we watched? Yeah. Where they go to Germany. And this one guy, they realize that I think they have the same German last name. The American who goes to fight in World War II sees the German that they've captured, and they've got the same heritage there, same last name. And ultimately, they shoot the guy off screen because he was somebody they captured, the bad guy. It's interesting being born the bad guy by default in war. I think, so what I'm saying is, it's interesting that we can perceive those people as not having souls. There's an episode of Black Mirror also where they have the American soldiers, they put a chip in their head to perceive the enemy as these zombies, and they don't speak English, and they just go, ah. So the soldiers know to shoot them. Well, one of the chip malfunctions in one of the soldiers, and they're able to see what this person is. They actually speak English. We finally had an enemy that had the same religion and the same language as us, and ethnically looked like us. It helps when our perceived enemy is a different religion, race, etc. So I think all of that, and that's why I said perceived enemies. So you won't remember my name. I'm a forgettable face. All I'll ever be is the least of these. You won't remember my name. That's how I think a lot of people perceive people that the United States fights in war, especially the innocent people, especially those women and children. Moving on to the second verse. Shout out, of course, to Johnny Cash again. I'm life in prison without parole. When I was in college, multiple times I was involved in a prison ministry where I would go, I don't know if you knew this.
I don't know.
When I was at 18, first year of college, there was a college ministry where I was at school, and we would go visit prisoners. I mean, we would go through high security. It was, I think, in Tampa or something like Lakeland, something like that. And we would go straight into the middle of the prison and basically just talk to these guys, hang out with them, and just make them feel human. And so I was involved in that. And then towards the end of college, I did this thing where it was juvenile delinquents or whatever. So it was teenage kids, including females, including girls, and whatever crime they committed, I don't know, but we were like sitting in a round table and we would talk, and then we'd kind of break up and talk one-on-one. And I guess I've always had compassion for people, because I think a lot of people end up in prison, they end up in crime, not because they're bad people, but because they weren't as fortunate as we are growing up. They didn't have the same opportunities, and all they knew probably was a lack of love and a lack of hope. So for me, I think it's so important to have compassion for people who, yes, even if they committed the crime, and even if they're paying for the crime, even if it's for the rest of their life, they're still human beings with souls. And I think from a Christian perspective, that's important to recognize. The next line, I'm climbing that wall for Mexico. Obviously, that's a nod to what's going on in American politics. That, there's all these debates about building a wall and keeping people out and all of this. Okay, but the main thing I think of is these are still people with souls. And it's easy for us to not even see them as human beings. Oh, well, are you here legally or not? It's like my ancestors from Mexico got here completely legally. And there's a lot of Mexican Americans right now who say, well, we got here legally. They're not. And so, but still, do they have souls? Can we perceive these people? Granted, they're escaping for a reason. So even beside from the politics, can we perceive these people as having souls? And then the next line, I think, is more challenging to the other side politically. A woman's choice when birth control is an afterthought. I'm not a soul. And I think it's just important to think about that. Whether abortion is legal or not, do we perceive these unborn as having souls? Because if we did, would it change our perspective on this? So that's just a challenging thought there. So then back to the chorus, you won't forget my name, or you won't remember my name. I am a forgettable face. All I'll ever be is the least of these. You won't remember my name. And then lastly, just to tie it all together, the whole point of the song is this, the whole challenge of the song. So hide behind a political side as the lobbyists buy, they purchase your version of right. And just deny that some live life in the dark instead of the light. And I think it's very relevant, I think, where we are in American politics, especially going into another election. What people tend to do is they draw a line in the sand and they say, morally, this is what I believe. Therefore, anybody on the other side of the line is wrong. And again, then we start talking about people that we don't perceive as having souls and that don't matter and that don't have a name and that don't have a face. It's easier to draw that line and hide behind that political name when ultimately, I purposely wrote this song to be challenging so that no one can feel really, oh yeah, I agree with every line in that song. The whole point is I wanted to write this to challenge people to think, is this one of those, that one line in the song that I don't like, is this part that I'm supposed to be challenged by? I think it's interesting because in modern day, you can write the most vulgar song, all kinds of profanity in it. And these days, I don't think it really would shock anybody. But I purposely wanted to write a song that would make the listener feel uneasy, feel challenged, and ultimately be more controversial than any kind of vulgar content or profanity in it. And I think that is what I wanted to do. I wanted to write a relevant song that's ultimately, again, a modern retelling of Johnny Cash's song, Man in Black. So, with that being said, in these last 30 seconds, I know that you've been sitting, my wife sang on this song. And I want to say thank you for participating in this with me, because when I wrote this, I thought, am I going to be doing this one by myself? I know this isn't like a fun song like the other one we did about, but If nothing else, thank you for agreeing to be on this song.
I
And
think it's cleverly written and timely.
thank you. Yeah, I'm just so glad that you chose to be a part of it. Because I'm going to admit, challenge of a songwriter, and I said this in one of the other videos, as you're writing this, you have to think, I'm pretty sure this would be a good song. I'm pretty sure this would matter. I'm pretty sure this is worth saying. But is it? And so when I showed my wife the song and we played it for her, she didn't even hesitate. And I thought, okay, wow. So you gave me that confirmation that I needed. And this song doesn't sound as good without you on it. It sounds so much better with you. And I know that because I've practiced it so many times because the words, it's almost written like a rap song. I purposely avoid rhymes when I write lyrics. This one, almost everything is a rhyme. In fact, when you look at the verses, the whole first verse, every single rhyme ends in an E sound. The second one, everyone in O. And then the last one, everyone in I. I've never rhymed that much. And it ultimately, it feels like a rap more than anything as far as the structure of it. So I remembered all the words to it, and every word mattered a lot to me. So there you go. That's what's really going on behind that song. Thank you. If you haven't watched the song, which why would you watch an 11.5-minute video explaining if you haven't watched it? But in case, I am putting the link right there. I'd love to know your thoughts on the song. Thank you for being a part of it.